Below is a calm, investigative script in a victim-first style, built for an 8 to 10 minute video. I've kept it respectful, restrained, and focused on the known facts of Alicia Showalter Reynolds' case. Alicia Showalter Reynolds was 25 years old in the spring of 1996, and by everything reported about her, she was in the middle of an ordinary life that suddenly turned tragic. She was a young woman with family who loved her, a woman whose disappearance would leave behind not just grief, but 3 decades of unanswered questions. Her parents, Harley and Sadie Showalter, have spent years speaking publicly about their daughter, still holding on to the hope that her case will not be forgotten. Alicia's story is not just the story of a crime. It is the story of a family that has lived with absence for 30 years, and of a case that became known not because of who she was, but because of the man who targeted her.
Investigators and local media would later refer to him as the 29 Stalker, a name that captured the fear surrounding a string of incidents tied to Route 29 in Virginia. On March 2, 1996, Alicia was last seen driving alone along Route 29 near Culpeper, Virginia. That was the day everything changed. She vanished in broad daylight in a place where she should have been able to travel safely. According to reports, her disappearance was connected to a dangerous pattern investigators were already beginning to see. A man approaching women along the highway, creating a sense of urgency and confusion, and then disappearing back into the distance. The details that emerge from that day are chilling precisely because they are so ordinary at first. A driver on a road, a request for help, a moment that seems small enough to be brushed aside, but that turned into something irreversible. In cases like this, the horror often begins with a conversation that appears harmless until it is far too late. Alicia never made it home. After she disappeared, the search for Alicia began immediately. But the case was not resolved quickly, and her family entered the painful and familiar space that relatives of missing and murdered victims know too well, waiting, hoping, and fearing what the silence might mean. 2 months later, on May 7, 1996, Alicia's body was found in a field outside Culpeper, in Lignum, about 15 miles from where she vanished. That discovery confirmed the worst for her family and shifted the case from a disappearance into a homicide investigation. The discovery of her body gave investigators a physical crime scene, but it did not give them the answer they needed. The case unfolded against the backdrop of a larger public fear. Multiple reports of a man along Route 29 stopping women, sometimes by pretending to need help or by making them feel they should pull over.
He became known as the 29 Stalker, and the name stuck because it described not only a suspect, but a method, a pattern, and a fear that other women on that roadway would become victims too. As the investigation developed, police examined possible connections between Alicia's murder and the suspect or suspects linked to the Route 29 cases. But at the time, police said they had not found evidence to connect one of the men under scrutiny to Alicia's murder, and it remains unclear whether he is still considered a viable possibility today. That uncertainty matters because it shows one of the central problems in cold cases. Suspicion is not the same as proof, and a public narrative is not the same as a courtroom case. Cases like this often become difficult to solve when the initial window for evidence closes.
If a killer leaves little behind, if witnesses remember fragments rather than clear details, and if there are multiple incidents with similar behavior but no direct forensic link, the investigation can stall. In Alicia's case, the public alarm around the 29 Stalker may have created awareness, but it did not create the one thing investigators needed most: a definitive, chargeable connection. That is part of why the case went cold. The danger had been recognized, but recognition alone does not equal resolution. The suspect pool appears to have remained uncertain,
and the investigation never produced the kind of evidence that would bring a conviction. 30 years later, the case is still unsolved. For Alicia's family, the passage of time has not softened the central wound. In April 2026, Harley and Sadie Showalter spoke with ABC 13's Noreen Turin, marking 30 years since Alicia's abduction and killing.
Their continued public presence is a reminder that cold cases are not frozen in time
For the people who live with them. The calendar moves, the headlines fade, but the absence remains unchanged. What also remains unknown is deeply important. It is still unclear who killed Alicia Showalter Reynolds. It is still unclear whether the person or people once tied to the Route 29 stalker cases were responsible for her death. It is still unclear whether there is evidence waiting to be re-examined, or a witness who has never spoken, or a detail that meant nothing in 1996, but could matter now. As of 2026, the case remains unsolved. No arrest has resolved it publicly. No explanation has closed the gap left by Alicia's death. And no answer has brought her family the certainty they deserve. What remains is a daughter remembered, a family still waiting, and a case that still sits in the category no one wants for their loved one. Open, unresolved, and unfinished.
If you were following this case back in 1996, what part of it stands out most to you now?